On episode 3, Stacy and I interview James Chen on an inspiring story with Campfire Stories. This truly was a great episode with James Chen. Just some of the stories and his journey that he was able to share with us was just unbelievably inspiring, and I hope to uh, share this much more broadly in the pursuit of other individuals being inspired by his journey.
Oh my goodness. This is an amazing story of somebody, yeah, I mean, somebody you may not have heard of, but he's highly active on Twitter and has just an incredible story of, um, I don't know, perseverance, I guess.
No, yeah, Stacy, I think perseverance is the right word, right? When you think about what it takes to travel through adversity, challenging times, sometimes perceived barriers in the road, I think perseverance is the perfect term to associate with James' journey.
Yeah, the obvious story that you can easily see by reading one of the articles written about him or just following him on Twitter is his high level of determination. But what struck me in talking to him is this man is so just passionately in love with the Salesforce community and the level at which he is already giving back to help others is phenomenal. So I'm really impressed with him and his love for the community. With that, let's just jump right in. Let's get to our story.
James, welcome to the Campfires podcast here. We're excited to have you. Thank you for joining.
Woo!
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Cue
Great.
the clapping audio. We need to get some soundtrack.
Yeah, I know, right? James, I'm truly excited. As we've been going through this series and interviewing various folks within the ecosystem and the community. One actually being a Salesforce employee, but then obviously with Rachel Park being within the community. Stacy and I have really just kind of spent some time looking for key individuals that have a very unique story that can inspire others based on some of the successes and achievements that you've accomplished. So when your name came up, it was truly kind of one of those looking forward to opportunities in terms of you being able to share your story.
Oh yes, justice was bugging me, James. Wait, you got to get James. Have you contacted James? We need to get James on.
Okay, so she wants to expose me now after I give the political.
Yeah, Justice was one of the few people who saw me from the very beginning to where I am now. And I'm still shocked at where I am today because less than a year and a half ago, I had no experience at all. I didn't know that Salesforce actually exists. And to now, I've met so many fantastic people through Salesforce, from the community, from where I work, and yeah, I still can't believe it.
Yeah, so I read through the article that where Salesforce actually featured you as a trailblazer story, and it's an incredible story, absolutely. The way that you taught yourself, you took the resources available with Trailhead, with community events, the user group meetings, and you gave yourself the skills that you needed to be able to land the job. When you saw the head of Map Anything, you took it upon yourself to approach and make the introduction and make things happen. And I love the story that you were so self-empowered. It seemed like your story focused a lot on two main attributions, obviously internally a lot. But it seems like you gave a lot of credit, one, to Trailhead and also to the community. So do you want to talk a little bit on how those two pieces specifically played such a big role in your story?
Of course. Trailhead is the platform where you should start if you have no experience at all. that is just easy and fun environment to learn in general. And I believe this is a great idea, and you don't see that in other companies where they have their
Mhm.
own platform to teach people their technology.
Mhm.
And also, the community is very unique. I haven't seen anything like it within Atlanta. And the first time I attended a user group event, I knew that this is what I was looking for all along. I
Mhm.
graduated with a computer system engineering degree, and there are just too many choices, and I couldn't focus on one. And I think there are over 200 programming languages,
Mhm.
and Apex and Visual Force are what I focus on now because
Mhm.
of the experience I had during those community events.
Mhm.
Because I walk in there, I had no experience at all, and everybody is so welcoming, even to someone who doesn't know the platform. Because usually, when you go to networking events, um, they want to learn from each other, but I didn't know anything at that point, and people were just are happy to be there and to share with their experience and uplift others as well. And that is what bring me into the ecosystem. And then uh, when I got on Twitter, that is when I really connect with the community on the interpersonal level,
Mhm.
because I was teaching myself Salesforce for 3/4 months straight, and then I just didn't have much interaction outside of Salesforce, really, because um, whenever I would go network, it's always Salesforce events, and I don't see that as much happening for other technology, and that's why I'm so grateful that Salesforce hosts these events, or they would sponsor these events, and that
Yeah,
allowed
it's
the
like
community.
coming home, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
something special about being around the people in the community. I live in a place where it's a smaller town and a little more remote. So it's a couple hours to get to some of the more active uh, user groups. So I treasure deeply events like Southeast Dream, and I bought my ticket this week. I'm so excited. Coming up in March, and Dreamforce, and and even we do Salesforce Saturdays, even if there's only 3 people. But anytime you get to interact with someone in the Ohana, Christy Guzman will sometimes come to the beach for a long weekend, and she'll call me up and we'll sit on the beach and talk about Salesforce. And you're right, you don't get that. I'm sure you talked to some people that you went to school with that did not pursue Salesforce, but went in other technology directions, and so you can see the difference. The Salesforce community, there is nothing else like it.
James, you said something I wanted to circle back on, and that was your first level of experience and exposure to the Salesforce community from a physical aspect. So attending some of these events, and then truly, obviously with a degree in computer engineering, you had been exposed to the various technologies out there and opportunities associated with that. But your experience with coming into the Salesforce community and just kind of seeing organically the nature of the individuals that existed within that community, I think is an important call out. So when I think of when I was new to the community, when I see Cynthia, when I see Yancey, when I see some other key individuals that are just not immersing themselves into the community, I think that level of feeling received is an important distinction when you're trying to identify where you want to be at in your career. One of my first interactions with you, James, I'm sure you'll recall, that really fascinated me with your approach is obviously the community's out there. They're there to help you. They're there to be available. But some of the onus, some of the accountability too, is for you to kind of reach out and say, here's our spaces you need help with, or you want to gain further understanding on. And I really, really, truly respected how you were reaching out, following people on Twitter within the Salesforce community. They would follow you back, obviously, and then you would DM them. And I remember I think you were studying for your first certification, and I mean, you just kind of all out there, went out there and said, hey, you had DM'd me a few times and said, hey, I'm trying to study, I'm trying to understand, permissions or sharing rules or workflow rules. And you were reaching out to members of the community in DM and asking for their insight and you did it in a way where you said, based on my research and based on what I know, I think these are the right answers. Um, can you shed some perspective based on what you know? And it's interesting because at the time, uh, I think I had one Salesforce certification. You had none. And at this time, you have, I don't know what, you have four, five certifications, three. I can't remember what it is. Six?
I have six now, six total.
Six certifications, and I still have one. So it's just been highly inspiring to just kind of see where you went from and to where you're at today. And I would see you as one of the exemplary leaders of the community in terms of what can be achieved when you put the work in. So I really appreciated and respected that about you.
Thank you so much. I hope I can pave it forward and help the community in the future as well. Because when I was reaching out, the response ratio was phenomenal. I'm talking about most of the people I reach out to respond with either good advice, pointers to other people who can help me with the problem, or just building friendship. I think, like I said, this community is very special. You don't get to do that in other technology. For example, it outside of Salesforce, I try to reach out to people, but I I got like very low response to other technologies that I was pursuing at the time. But Salesforce is different. Whether if it's on Success Community, Twitter, or LinkedIn, I get a very high response rate, and I think people in the community genuinely wants to help others to succeed.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. How have you felt, James? Let me ask you this question. How have you felt? So you talked a little bit about Trailhead. How have you felt? Vala Afshar has been quoted as saying, this is a free gamified platform that gives you the opportunity and ability to get tooled and equipped in various subject matter areas within the Salesforce ecosystem. How is because I know uh, based on our conversations, I think your background is you immigrated here, I think, on your own from China. Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct. Okay. So how has the learning experience been for you in terms of how Trailhead is constructed? Is it pretty, declarative in terms of what's being explained leading into the quizzes? Is there give us your perspective, I guess, kind of, from an external perspective coming in, immigrating from China and now leveraging this technology and utilizing Trailhead as the catalyst. Maybe give us some insight on what Trailhead is doing great in terms of this platform they've created for educational purposes of learning their tool.
Trailhead, it's a very friendly platform that all ages could just log in and learn and have fun. And other platforms are more focused on the learning side. They ignore the fun aspect of the learning. And in Trailhead, it's colorful. Um, the instructions and details are funny and yet educational at the same time. It's really hard to describe uh,
Hmm.
Trailhead, but it can be addictive as well. um,
Hmm.
I was doing that for around 10 plus hours a day for 2 months. I think it was 7 days a week, and yeah,
Wow.
it was very addictive.
So I just want to pause you there. I want to just circle back on that. I think that's a very, Stacy, I think that's a very, very important
Hmm.
call out. 10 hours a day, 7 days a week is what you were doing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And you even went through stages of like a badge a day for a month, but you were racking them up faster than that, even.
Yeah, that was the only way for me to get experience because I have to learn the platform
Hmm.
before I could, interview for a job, and
Hmm.
uh, that was a great experience. I had fun doing that, and it was a lot of learning. I think I took a few photos of how many notebooks I had. I think there was a huge stack at the end after I got certified. Yeah, it, it's
Wow.
hard. It's hard to believe that I've done it for that many hours. Looking
Mhm.
back at it, that was that was something that I don't know. I think I was just in a flow state where
Hmm.
I just focus on one thing and one thing only. And
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
normally I wouldn't focus on something uh, in that intense level. I wouldn't focus on something for a month. But once I passed that 1 month mark, I knew this is something that I can do as a career.
So, what point are you at now? Obviously, you are a ranger. Do you know how many badges you have completed at this point?
130 plus, I think. I haven't checked the exact number, but when I was in a event, the last time I checked, it was 130 plus.
Okay. Are you still, I mean, obviously you're working now full time, but do you still try to do uh, trailhead badges to refresh or learn new things along the way?
Yeah, uh, I do keep up with some badges as well as learning new ones. Uh,
Mhm.
I actually do that in my job to learn about technology. For example, the continuous integration badge, I look at that and see how I could use it to help me leverage that knowledge within the company.
Hmm.
So you can always learn whether if you have no experience or you're working at a job. Trailhead is designed for you to learn at anywhere and any time that you choose to.
Hmm. Have you done any of the super badges that they offer?
I am in the process of doing a couple of them, but I have not completed them yet.
Gotcha. They do take a bit longer. They're like full projects.
Yes, and it's hard to debug uh, some steps, but it's challenging and rewarding.
Hmm. Yes. Yes. We've done a couple of the Salesforce Saturdays where we go through at least the beginning part of a super badge together, which is nice, um, to be able to do it with others, you know?
I wanted to pivot just temporarily here, quick. One of the things I've kind of been interested in hearing and learning from you, something I don't know yet, is can you maybe give us and the listeners just some insight into your background? Tell us how what led you to America, and how you got here. I guess what were the circumstances of that? Was it to find opportunity, further education? I think for a lot of us, the one thing I've learned about the community, obviously, you got Stacy over there in North Carolina. You got me here in Minneapolis. I was born in Toronto, Canada. My parents are South African, born and raised there. But, when I look at the entire Ohana, there's so many different geographical locations, and what our backgrounds are very different. And it really plays into the whole conversation around diversity and inclusion. And I think one of the things I've learned just in my time and experience within the ecosystem of networking and collaborating with others is that everybody's got a unique story, and sometimes based on what that journey or that path might have been could serve as a source of inspiration for whoever is listening or watching or following you on Twitter. So maybe in your words, share with us, the story of James Chen from China to America.
Okay. So I was born in a city called Taishan. It's a small city within the Guangdong province in China. It's the southern region of China. Actually, the city that I was born in is adjacent to Hong Kong. Um, it's and in that area, it's common for people to immigrate overseas to work and eventually settle down. And my family had the opportunity to immigrate to the United States through a relative sponsoring us, and that's how we were able to get here. And from a small city and coming to America, it was just a huge cultural shock because here is very much diverse. In China, it was, well, at least for the city where I'm from, it wasn't diverse at all. I think in my 11 years in China, I've only seen a handful of foreigners, uh, and that was in a small city. But I'm sure uh, that may not apply for bigger cities like Beijing or Shanghai. But from where I was from, it wasn't diverse at all. And I was the first generation college student. So that's why I was teaching myself in a lot of the areas. Because growing up, I didn't have all these resources that I could access to with parents who graduated college. Um, and I was basically on my own in terms of defining my path in life. And that is a basic summary. Do you have any questions that you want to ask specifically?
That's exactly what I was looking for, James. I mean, your story is obviously your story, so I think, wow, that's amazing, Stacy. Wow, yeah, that's
Yeah.
very very
Awesome.
amazing.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Um, I don't even know where to go from there. Uh, that's that's awesome. Um,
No, I think what I was trying to do there, Stacy, I was just, again, like, we look at even the gift squad, right? Everybody
mhm,
is from different places. And I think, you know, me being, born in Toronto, Canada, but being South African in the sense that my mom and dad were born in South Africa, there are unique
mhm,
challenges at times that can make the learning experience uh, different. I don't want to say more difficult, but different. And I think, James, that could be a source of motivation for James, right? Him just sharing that
mhm,
his family was sponsored to come here. That's a blessing and an opportunity that James might have treated with the level of diligence that was warranted.
mhm,
And that, from a perception perspective, that could be what fueled him to be doing 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? I think putting that narrative together is
mhm,
a phenomenal depiction of how James has kind of navigated himself desirably. So
mhm.
I appreciate you
Yeah.
sharing that level of candor. Obviously, you didn't have to, James, but I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's awesome. And it reminds me a lot, just as I know you and I have talked about, Trailhead. And yes, it is a great tool to learn Salesforce, but it is so much more than that. And the way that it has professional development and other modules. And some of my favorite badges have been ones on diversity and the importance of surrounding yourself with people from different cultures and backgrounds and viewpoints. Mhm.
Yeah, and if for those that are listening, a phenomenal Twitter handle to just piggybacking on what Stacy just said, which I believe. So one, we're completely aligned, but a phenomenal Twitter handle to follow within the Salesforce ecosystem is Office of Equality. And
Mhm.
this is a ERG that is managed by the Salesforce organization, and it's an ERG that's committed towards the diversity and inclusion conversations and broad awareness and representation of the community within Salesforce and externally. And I think it's if you're interested in Salesforce in any capacity, that's definitely a Twitter handle to follow, and you'll see
Mhm.
a great representation of some of the amazing things Tony Profit and team are doing. Molly Q Ford, Iori. There's just so many names, right? Mark Benioff, Layla, Cindy Robbins. They're all doing great, phenomenal things, and a lot of that content is being curated, and funneled through that Office of Equality Twitter handle.
Mhm.
So thanks for that call out, Stacey. I think that was good.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. So then, James, let me put the question to you. I've shared before my favorite badge. Um, is those surrounding professional development, specifically in the diversity and inclusion ones. Justice really takes a liking to. He's enjoyed learning about like the security model and those
Change management.
areas. No wrong. Yep, no wrong answer. But James, what do you have a favorite badge or a couple of them that you've particularly enjoyed?
I do have a few favorite. One of the most memorable one was the Heroku badge. I was doing a project uh, to learn more about Heroku, and I just got stuck and I couldn't get through it. I keep getting errors, and then I sort of just pause and move on with other ones. And that was in the early stage of my trailhead experience. Once I was getting somewhat comfortable on the platform, and I decided to start over and give it another shot, and I got it. That was a very special badge because I
Nice. Yep.
persisted and kept trying uh, with the new knowledge that I learned along the way. And that was very rewarding for me in terms of uh, just keep being persistent and keep working on it and don't give up. And that is what I learned from having that badge.
That's awesome. That's really incredible. I've had similar experience, not on the developer level and certainly not Heroku, but I remember the feeling whenever I was able to create a flow for the first time that worked, you know, which seems little now, but at the time it was a big deal, and it was thanks to Trailhead.
Yeah, for me, it was like Stacy said. I've been a huge advocate of governance, security, change management, and what that looks like in terms of having a release management strategy. What does that look like in terms of plan, build, test, deploy? But the process, the look, I almost just gave it away. The trailhead that I was really excited about, they kind of gave me that similar aha moment because I had struggled with it quite a bit, much like you did, James, with Heroku, was Process Builder. So by nature, I'm a declarative admin. I have dabbled within the programmatic side of Apex and Visualforce early on in my Salesforce journey, and was fortunate enough to take a training from Don Robbins and Leah McGowan Hare on Apex. I would think my prior Java experience did help with understanding object-oriented programming with Apex, but by nature, I'm more comfortable in the declarative space. I rather focus my energy around that. So when Process Builder was becoming more of a emphasis in terms of automation within Salesforce, I just needed to learn and understand how I could leverage this as a solution to automate processes in Salesforce. And I was running into barriers left and right, left and right, left and right. And much like you, Stacy, and much like you, James, Trailhead obviously was persistent in terms of conveying the information in a very easy to receive and internalize manner that I was able to eventually. That and Ben Balapiu, shout out to Ben Balapiu, he helped me out a bit on Twitter DM. So no, it's good. Those aha moments are phenomenal. And Trailhead does a very, very great job at positioning you well to have those aha moments. So James, tell us a little bit about. So what would you consider yourself today? Are you an administrator? Are you a developer? Tell us a little bit about that and what that means to you.
My current role is more of a hybrid between developer and administrator. We are in a smaller team managing the internal process for the Salesforce platform. And I would say a majority of my role is developer, and I would do administrative tasks as well. I think uh, I was fortunate to learn both sides of the track when I was starting, and it makes it easier for me to transition in between point and uh, click and code, and also uh, writing code as well.
Okay. No, I think you're certainly not the only one. I think there are a number of individuals within the community. There's this term solo admin, and I think most people associate administrator with it, but there are some scenarios. I think Stacy, correct me if I'm wrong. His name is Rob. I always butcher the last name. Cowell. Cowell. He's an Cowell, yeah. He's an individual within the community, much like yourself, that is a hybrid from what I've perceived in terms of uh, still managing the system from an administrative perspective, but also having the skill set and understanding on how to go into the system and automate from a programmatic development perspective. So yeah, I think having the skill set of left, administrator and developer in that hybrid is a crucial role for any organization because with large size organizations that I've worked with in the past, what tends, and not even, what tends to be the approach, James, is the any efforts that exceed a certain threshold in terms of time as it relates to development will tend to get outsourced to, um, a centralized center, in India or wherever, for that work to be vetted, prioritized, and completed. And when you're a smaller to mid-sized organization, obviously from a financial implications perspective, based on how you're structured as an organization, sometimes it makes more sense to hire that talent and retain that knowledge and expertise internally. But I think those are just some of the unique dynamics that create opportunities for us as administrators, developers, and hybrids. So that's good. Let's see, Stacy.
Yeah, well, we've talked about where he came from, what he's doing now. The next logical question is, James, what's next in your
What's
trailblazer journey?
next? I I'm going to the Trailhead X conference. Uh, this is the first major Salesforce event that I'm attending in San Francisco.
So you
Uh,
haven't been to
I've
Dreamforce?
I've never been to Dreamforce or any of those other major conference. This is the first time that I'm going. I will also be going with a co-worker of mine. Uh, his name is Chandler, and he's a great resource. He just started the same way that I did. He taught himself everything to um, transition from a administrator to developer, and he done it before the Trailhead platform came out. And then he just mentioned how uh, it is um, it is like a gold mine to have Trailhead as the resource, because pre-Trailhead era learning Salesforce require a lot more dedication,
Hmm.
because because
It was
you
very different. We had these
yeah
workbooks that they would share, and you had to work your way through it. Yeah. No Astro, no Cody,
yeah
no Cloudy, no funny
you don't have
puns.
as much
Yes, it was very
of
different.
the visual, and it's just so different from what he described.
Awesome. So super excited for you. That's in about a month.
Yeah, congratulations. That's
Yeah.
gonna be exciting.
So James, what's
My
your
Twitter
Twitter
handle
handle?
is Gia Supernova. It's JIA Supernova.
Okay. Okay, so I was gonna say everybody who's listening to this episode should reach out to James at JIA Supernova on Twitter and tell him that you're going to Trailhead DX also and make plans to meet up. So James will make sure you are surrounded by your Ohana. Everybody loves you. They'll be so excited to get to see you in person. That'll
Yes,
be
I'm
awesome.
excited to meet the people I haven't met yet from Twitter.
So let me throw this at you, James. I think some of us know, and those who don't know, I'm gonna go ahead and share it. Our very own James Chen has met Mark Benioff. Would you like to share how that came about and what that experience was like, James? I haven't met Mark yet, so I just want to put out
Yes.
my bitterness out there.
so so Mark Benioff came to Atlanta on December 1st of 2016, I believe. Um, it was a smaller event where a lot of the company execs or managing roles, they would come to that conference, and Mark Benioff was basically doing a recap of Dreamforce. And um, I think at the time I I was selected as the My Trailblazer Story winner. uh, and I believe that's how I got the invitation to that specific event. It was an event with less than 500 people, I believe, and that's how I was able to meet with Mark Benioff after uh, he was finished with the keynote, and he was doing a meet and greet afterward, and I just couldn't miss the opportunity, and I I was fortunate to meet him that day. It was truly I still don't know how I got the invitation to the event till this day, but yeah, I was very fortunate because I realized not many people have met him, especially after a few months that you've started on the platform.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you had the opportunity, however you got invited, and you took advantage of it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think James. Yeah, you were definitely presented with that opportunity. I think that's a great one, and I'm glad you seized it. But make no mistake, you definitely did receive that opportunity because of the amazing, amazing things you've done in a very short time frame. You know, Vala uh, once said to Stacy and I in a recent interview, and in person actually at Dreamforce, is that it may not seem like everybody is watching and responding to everything you're doing in real time, but everybody sees everything. So trust me when I tell you, I've seen you do a lot of great things, and I haven't necessarily always retweeted or liked it or whatever. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think your reputation precedes you, just because, there are, what was it, and quote me guys here because I can't recall, but there was an Indeed publication that was released, I think, a year ago that showed the top positions to work for
Mhm.
based on I think it was a domestic study, and Salesforce administrator and Salesforce developer. There were multiple factors that were evaluated,
Mhm.
but Salesforce administrator, Salesforce developer were called out in the top five. And the important call out about that was that it was specific to Salesforce. It wasn't just front stack
Mhm.
developer or application administrator. It was Salesforce administrator, Salesforce developer. And I guess what I'm saying, James, is when Salesforce has an opportunity to leverage you and your story and your example and your journey as a marker for what the blueprint is for how you get to this point, and they can directly and objectively point to what you've done in Trailhead, what you've done in the community. It's a
Mhm.
match made in heaven for why you would want to exemplify and was gonna say Spotify for some reason, thinking of music, and highlight what that individual is doing because it's gonna be inspiring. And this is kind of how Stacy came up with the idea for Campfire Stories, and her and I collaborated. And I said we got to get James on the
Mhm.
episode because somebody's gonna be listening to this
Mhm.
episode, and they're gonna go home and say, okay, if I do 10 hours of Trailhead 7 days a week, maybe one day I can be a Salesforce
Oh,
developer or a hybrid 3 months from now,
absolutely.
right?
I
It's
believe if
achievable.
you put that amount of dedication into anything, you will see result. Even if you don't get to your goal in that time, you will see result as you improve each and every day.
Yes, excellent point. Excellent point. So, James, one final question before we wrap up. Obviously, anybody who's wanting to get into Salesforce, they need to get into Trailhead. Um, but on top of getting into Trailhead uh, vigorously, what other advice do you have for somebody who is wanting to begin a Salesforce career?
Create a Twitter and LinkedIn account. Those would help you keep in touch with the people you meet from the user group events. User group events is where you could pick up uh, knowledge and also meet people who could help you into moving forward with the next step in your career. And I think local user group events are a must.
It's awesome. Awesome. Cool. Great advice. And James, what a remarkable story at every step of the way for, getting to America, getting through school, getting into Salesforce, getting to meet Mark, and getting to be on
Yes,
our podcast, right?
the most important one.
No, we have really, really enjoyed having you and hearing your story. And, like Justice said, that's what this podcast is all about, is giving a platform for people to share their story in hopes that it will help you connect to people, help people connect to you, and then ultimately inspire others. Because there are people out there looking for their dream job, and maybe they don't even know what it is yet, but maybe it's a job on the platform. So that's awesome. Yeah, so we really appreciate your time. And you are available to connect on LinkedIn and Twitter. Also, if you are not following, our podcast has a new handle, SF Campfire, is how you can find us so that you can see all of the cool things that we're doing. Justice is great at giving sneak peeks of who is going to be on upcoming episodes, because we get so excited whenever we've got a story to share that we just can't keep it quiet. So make sure you're following us. We appreciate reviews in the iTunes as well. So that's awesome. Thank you guys. Justice, it's been a pleasure as always to hang out
As
with
it is
you.
with you, and thank you, James, for taking time out of your day
Thank
to
you for
chat with
having
us.
me. I had a great time interviewing.
Fantastic. All right. We'll see you guys on the next episode.